Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. The Afghan government has confirmed its participation in two separate US and Russian-backed peace conferences. The Russian-backed conference is scheduled for this Thursday in Moscow, where the US-sponsored talks will take place in Turkey next month. The two meetings are aimed at supporting talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government as violence continues to rage in the war-torn country. Ethiopia has rejected US accusations of ethnic cleansing in the West Tigray region as unfounded and spurious. Thousands of people were reportedly killed during last year's offensive against local rebels. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has earlier called for accountability of the Ethiopian government. In Sri Lanka, the Minister for Public Security says the country will ban the wearing of burqa and shut over 1,000 madrasas on national security grounds. Sarath Virasakira told a news conference that he has sent the summary for cabinet approval. The wearing of burqa was temporarily banned in 2019 after more than 250 people were killed in a series of bombings on churches and hotels. This ban was lifted earlier this year after criticism from the US and international rights groups. India has reported this year's biggest spike in single-day COVID-19 infections with nearly 25,000 tested positive overnight. India's caseload has exceeded 11.3 million, while its death toll has surged over 158,000. Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded over 2,300 new cases and 46 deaths overnight, taking the toll to over 13,400. The global tally of the coronavirus infections has topped 119 million with 2.6 million deaths. Bitcoin rose above $60,000 for the first time as the world's most popular virtual currency continued its record-breaking run. The sharp rise in the price of the cryptocurrency is due to its wider adoption and optimism in financial markets. And in the English Premier League, Leeds United have played a goalless draw against Chelsea at Elland Road. They are still 11th on the table, while Chelsea sit comfortably on the 4th spot. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The Afghan government has confirmed its participation in two separate US and Russian-backed peace conferences. The Russian-backed conference is scheduled for this Thursday in Moscow, while the US-sponsored talks will take place in Turkey next month. Moscow has also invited several regional players, including Taliban representatives. It said the Taliban must be part of any interim setup in Afghanistan. A US draft peace plan has also called for an inclusive Afghan government until a new constitution is agreed. The two conferences are aimed at supporting talks between the Taliban and Kabul as violence continues to rage in the war-torn country. In the last 24 hours, at least 27 people have been killed in separate incidents of violence across the country. At least 6 more anti-coup protesters have been killed by security forces in Myanmar. Several others were injured in the clashes with police across the country. Police opened fire on a sit-in protest in Mandalay, killing 2 people and injuring several others. 2 died in police fighting in the commercial capital of Yangon, while another person was killed in the central town of PA. It comes as activists are marking the death anniversary of a student whose killing in 1988 sparked an uprising against the then military government. Meanwhile, the US, India, Australia and Japan vowed to work together to restore democracy in Myanmar. The UN says more than 70 people have been killed and over 2,000 detained in Myanmar protests since the February 1st coup. Sri Lanka says it will ban the wearing of veil and shut more than 1,000 Islamic schools on what it said national security grounds. In a news conference, the Minister for Public Security, Sarathawira Sakira, said the proposal has been sent for cabinet approval. The minister called the veil a sign of extremism and alleging the schools have been flouting national educational policy. The latest move follows the last year's order of mandating cremation of COVID-19 victims that opposed the burial practice of Muslims. This ban was lifted earlier this year after criticism from the United States and international rights groups. In 2019, the country temporarily banned the veil. In the U.S. capital of Washington, a large number of Sikh community members has protested against the Indian government's treatment of farmers. The protesters gathered near the White House. They were holding placards that read, "India is a terrorist state and stop Indian terrorism." The farmers' protests in India have gained international recognition after their agitation turned violent. More than 250 farmers have died in the protests that started 4 months ago at Delhi borders. But the farmers vow to intensify the agitation and say they will not budge until the center withdraws the 3 laws completely. The US says it is communicating with Iran on the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal through indirect diplomacy. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan revealed this at a press briefing. Sullivan said Washington has engaged European states to convey messages vis-a-vis stances on the deal compliance. He said despite difficulties, the US believes that it can prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon through the diplomatic process. Sullivan added currently Washington is waiting to hear further from Tehran over how it would like to proceed. Last month, the US indicated readiness to talk to Iran, seeking to revive the nuclear deal that Washington abandoned in 2018. Russia has accused the United States of using IT opportunities to engage in unfair competition in all spheres. Moscow says Washington is using social media platforms arbitrarily and indiscriminately censoring content. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said the social media platforms do not have unified standards for managing themselves. In a post on Facebook, Zakharova termed this a semantic and technological stalemate. She slammed the platforms for censoring digital content randomly without the decision of a competent authority. Earlier, Russia said it was slowing down Twitter over what it described as a failure to remove banned content. At least 6 people, including a Palestinian minister, have been injured after Israeli army clashed with protesters in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian activists say Minister Nasiri Abu Jaish was injured by a stun grenade and was also battered by a soldier's weapon. Palestinian media says dozens of protesters were affected by the tear gas. Palestinians were protesting against illegal Jewish settlements in the West Bank and the Wall of Separation. Yesterday, Israeli troops detained 5 Palestinian minors and obstructed many from entering Al-Aqsa Mosque. The UN Security Council has called for the withdrawal of the foreign troops and mercenaries from Libya without any delay. In a unanimously approved statement, Council welcomed the Libyan Parliament's approval of a new unified government. The statement called on all the parties to implement the ceasefire agreement in full. The Council said it recognizes the need to plan for the disarmament and to establish a civilian-led security architecture for Libya. The ceasefire agreement was reached in October last year, calling for the withdrawal of all the foreign forces from Libya in 3 months. According to the global body, around 20,000 foreign troops and mercenaries remained in Libya at the end of 2020, but no withdrawals have been observed since. In Algeria, thousands took to the streets of the capital, Algiers, against President's announcement of early legislative elections. The protesters are demanding a complete overhaul of the ruling elite, an end to corruption, and the army's withdrawal from the politics. Protesters say they will refuse to vote in the upcoming polls held under a political elite they reject. The vote is part of reforms promised by President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, following protests that forced his predecessor to resign in 2019. Tebboune dissolved Algeria's parliament last month and has now set June 12 for early elections. Ethiopia has rejected U.S. allegations of ethnic cleansing during conflict in the restive Tigray region. In a statement, the foreign ministry accused Washington of overblowing things out of proportion. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has earlier said there are credible reports of human rights abuses in Western Tigray. The conflict began last year when the government launched an offensive against local rebels following an attack on military facilities. Thousands of people were reportedly killed and an estimated 100,000 people displaced during the conflict. The UN Security Council has urged Somalia to organize elections without delay. In a resolution, the Security Council stressed the pressing threat from Al-Shabaab and other armed groups. The resolution authorized the African Union to maintain its nearly 20,000 strong force in Somalia until the end of the year to counter the militia group. The Security Council said its objective is to transfer security to local authorities with the aim of Somalia taking the lead in 2021. This comes amid pressure on President Mohammed Abdullahi Mohammed after elections on 8th of February failed to take place. The Security Council has urged the federal government and regional states to organize elections in line with the September 17, 2020 agreement. New Zealand remembers the victims of Christchurch mosque shooting ahead of the second anniversary of the terrorist attack. A gunman opened fire on Muslim worshippers and killed 51 people in the March 15 shooting.
A remembrance service was held at the Christchurch Arena, where the family members of the victims spoke about the tragedy. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern also attended the memorial. At the service, the names of the victims were read aloud, while their pictures were displayed on a large screen. A minute of silence was also observed for the victims. Community members delivered prayers during the memorial, while Ardern spoke about how words have the power to heal.
We all own and hold the power of words. We use them, we hear them, we respond to them. How we choose to use this most powerful of tools is our choice. There will be an unquestionable legacy from March 15. Much of it will be heartbreaking, but it is never too early or too late for the legacy to be a more inclusive nation.
New Zealand's worst peacetime killing shook the country to its core and prompted the government to quickly tighten gun laws.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The global tally of coronavirus infections has exceeded 119 million with 2.6 million deaths. The World Health Organization has granted emergency authorization to Johnson & Johnson's one-shot COVID-19 vaccine. More on the pandemic in this report.
The world hoped for a better and happier 2021, but with the political controversies, socio-economic impact, mutating variants, and now the questions on vaccines' efficacy are dampening the confidence. In the US, President Joe Biden is set to promote his $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan next week by hitting the road on Help is Here tour. The US has also become the only country to top the 100 million COVID-19 vaccines administrations since the first shot on 14th of December last year. Meanwhile, the White House says the US has turned down a number of requests from around the world for COVID-19 vaccines. However, over in the south, the situation is much grimmer. Brazil has reported over 2,200 daily fatalities for the third day in a row, with the toll crossing 275,000. The country is in the tight grip of crisis as a deadly wave takes hold, pushing hospitals and intensive care units towards a collapse. The World Health Organization has warned that the state of the pandemic in Brazil is deeply concerning and serious action needs to be taken.
Brazil neighbors many countries in Latin America, almost all of them except a couple. And some countries are doing better in the neighborhood. But if the situation in Brazil continues to be serious like this, then the neighboring countries will be affected.
4 Spanish regions have stopped administering AstraZeneca's doses following reports of the formation of blood clots. Austria earlier stopped using AstraZeneca shots while it investigated death from clotting and a case of pulmonary embolism. However, AstraZeneca has insisted that its vaccine is safe. It says analyses of safety data of more than 10 million records show no evidence of an increased risk of said diseases. The European Union is also now investigating whether any of the 3 COVID-19 vaccines approved in the bloc might be linked to blood clotting. Meanwhile, Italy has announced another nationwide lockdown while the Prime Minister thanked citizens for their infinite patience.
A few days ago, I thanked the Italians for their infinite patience. I am aware that today's measures will have consequences for the education of children, for the economy, and also for the psychological state of all of us. However, these measures are necessary to avoid a deterioration that would make even more stringent measures inevitable.
Australia recorded the first local case in more than 2 weeks after a doctor tested positive, triggering restrictions in area hospitals. Meanwhile, South Korea has also reported a 3-week high of 490 new cases as authorities prepare for a broad vaccine rollout.
Pakistan has reported another 46 deaths from coronavirus overnight. The Health Ministry says the nationwide death toll has reached 13,476. The ministry registered over 2,300 new cases in the past 24 hours. It said the infection tally has crossed 602,000, of which more than 569,000 have recovered. The ministry said the number of active cases in the country is over 19,700. Meanwhile, Planning and Development Minister Asad Umar says the fast spread of the UK strain is driving the third wave in Pakistan. The government has recently reimposed restrictions and appealed to the masses to strictly adhere to COVID-19 SOPs. Pakistan has dispatched the first consignment of the COVID-19 relief goods to Iraq as per the directives of the Prime Minister. In a statement, the Foreign Office said 2 other planes carrying the relief items will be sent in the coming week. Spokesman Zahid Hafiz Chowdhury said Pakistan stands by the people of Iraq in this difficult time. He said the 2 countries have a multifaceted relationship marked by growing cooperation in diverse fields. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has approved the establishment of a civil drone authority to develop and regulate the industry. In a statement, Khan said using drone technology for commercial and development purposes is the need of the hour. The new authority will be mandated to regulate and control the unmanned aircraft system in the country. It will also decide matters related to licensing, importing, and issuing of drone permits. In Jordan, 8 patients have died in the capital Amman due to a shortage of oxygen supplies. State media said several other patients are in critical condition. It said the health minister has resigned following the death of the patients. In a statement, Jordanian Prime Minister Bashir al-Kassavaneh said he has ordered an immediate investigation into the incident. He said those responsible for the incident will be held accountable. In Kazakhstan, 4 people have been killed and 2 others injured after a military plane crash-landed in Almaty. The aircraft reportedly belonged to Kazakh border guards. Authorities say there were 6 people on board the plane when it crashed. They say 2 survivors have been shifted to hospitals. The U.S. city of Minneapolis has reached a $27 million settlement with the family of George Floyd. The move seeks to settle a lawsuit by Floyd's family over his custodial death that stirred worldwide protests against a racial injustice. The Minneapolis City Council voted unanimously to approve the pre-trial settlement. Floyd family's attorney, Benjamin Crumb, said the agreement is the largest pre-trial settlement of a lawsuit in the U.S. history. At a news conference, Crumb said it signifies that unjust taking of a black life will no longer be written off as unworthy of consequences.
George Floyd's life matters, and by extension, black lives matter. It sends a message that the unjust taking of black life will no longer be written off as trivial, unimportant, or unworthy of consequences.
Meanwhile, the jury selection for the trial of a former police officer, Derek Chauvin, is underway. Chauvin is charged with Floyd's murder, and the hearing is set to begin on 29th of March. Moving on, Bolivia's former interim president, Janine Áñez, has been arrested over her role in a coup against her predecessor, Evo Morales. In a social media post, Government Minister Carlos Eduardo del Castillo said she is currently in police custody. Media reports say former ministers who backed her were also being detained by the authorities. Earlier, Áñez tweeted that an arrest order was issued by the public prosecutor's office. She described it as political persecution against the interim government. Bolivia is mired in political turmoil since 2019 when Morales sought a 4th term in office. However, his campaign ended in a contested vote count and deadly protests. Cuba has accused the U.S. of stoking illegal migration but not processing visas in Havana, making it easier for Cubans to claim asylum. This comes after Cuba's vessel last week capsized near the Bahamas, leaving some people floating in the water for over 14 hours. The Cuban Foreign Ministry said Bahamas Defense Force ship rescued 12 people and recovered 1 body, but it said several people, including women and 2 children, are still missing. In a statement, the ministry said the suspension of granting visas constituted incentives for irregular migration. Responding, U.S. State Department said it has designated embassy in Guyana to process immigrant visas for residents of Cuba. The department said the U.S. is committed to supporting safe, orderly, and humane migration from Cuba. Torrential rains in Peru have left thousands of people displaced and caused a path of destruction. Across much of the north, Peruvians struggled with flooded fields, dead livestock, and cut-off roads as rivers overflowed. In Bagua, firefighters have rescued an old woman trapped in a house after heavy rain collapses one of the walls, blocking her exit. Neighbors called authorities after hearing her yell for help. Authorities warn heavy rains are likely to cause more flooding in the regions of Lambayeque, Cajamarca, Piura, Tumbes, Junín, and Huánuco. China has launched its 4th group of Yongan 31 remote sensing satellites. A Long March 4C rocket carried the group into the space from the Jiquan Satellite Launch Center in northwest China. According to the Launch Center, it is the 363rd flight mission of the Long March carrier rocket series. The satellites will be used for electromagnetic environment surveys and other related technology tests. Beijing launched the first group of the Yongan 31 remote sensing satellites back in 2018. In Thailand, people celebrate Elephant Day, holding a fruit banquet for dozens of animals in the ancient capital Ayutthaya. Festival was held with hopes that COVID-19 travel restrictions would ease soon and foreign visitors will return to revive the tourism industry. The tourism-reliant country has yet to lift a travel ban imposed last April to curb the outbreak. Elephants have been a source of national pride and cultural identity for Thailand throughout its history. They have been used for labor, transport, and in battlefield triumphs by warriors and kings. But animal rights groups have also called for the elephant camps in Thailand to end animal shows and rights. The first global study on human twinning suggests that more and more twins are being born now. However, researchers behind the study say that the world may now have reached peak twin. More in this report.
More doppelgangers might be roaming around the world now than ever before. According to a study published in the journal Human Reproduction, the global twinning rate has risen by a third since the 1980s, with about 1.6 million twins born each year worldwide. The findings suggest that 12 per 1,000 deliveries are now twins as compared to 9 per 1,000 around 30 years ago. Researchers have attributed medically assisted reproduction techniques like IVF as the primary cause of the increased rate.
We're seeing levels of twin births that we haven't seen before if we look at the whole world together. And that's mainly because the twinning rate in rich developed countries has gone up in the last 2, 3, 4 decades, basically since the introduction of IVF treatment, some other medically assisted reproduction, and the postponement of births, women giving birth at older ages, which in itself, independent of IVF, also increases the twinning rate.
Scientists behind the research say that high-income regions such as Europe and North America are now emphasizing on refining fertility treatments. These recent advances in assisted reproductive techniques have decreased the likelihood of twinning, particularly in these regions.
We think we're actually at the peak, or that we might be at the peak, because this increase that we've seen driven by IVF, that has come to a standstill, and in some cases actually has already declined a little bit because the treatment is more effective, it's more successful now than it used to be.
During the study, scientists collected data on twinning rates from 165 countries between the years 2010 and 2015, and from 112 countries for the years 1980 to 1985.
For most people, physical activities take a backseat when they reach old age. But soon after taking his COVID vaccine, an 89-year-old New Yorker has returned to his favorite activity, dancing. More about this young at the heart American in this report.
Just like wine, Bob Holtzman is getting better day by day. Over the last 7 decades, he danced his way around the city's events to the rhythms of swing, foxtrot and salsa. Holtzman is close to 90, but instead of entertaining regrets about the past, he cherishes every second of his life.
I am 89 years old, but I am, I would say, days away from being 90 years old. And I feel as though that's part of a club. You know, you join a club of people who've lived a long time, and they have a lot to look back on, and they hope to look forward, because this is a great time to live.
He has always been a fixture in dancing parties in Bryant Park and other places. When the pandemic struck in March last year, Holtzman found himself stuck at home, happily occupied with reading e-books. He believes seniors are better at coping with the uncertainties that have arisen during the pandemic.
Seniors, people like my age, seem to deal much better with the reality of COVID than people who were quite a bit younger. And my own guess has to do with the fact that when you're a senior, you've lived a while, you have the resources and the experience to be able to deal with almost any problem.
Across the US, COVID-19 vaccinations are changing seniors' daily lives for the better. Older Americans are now visiting family members, eating away, and shopping in stores without fear of death or hospitalization.
Art is not about the tools being used, but how the artist uses them to produce the end results. In Philippines, Gilbert Angeles is transforming trash into aesthetic artwork to raise awareness about the waste disposal. More in this report.
While scattering tiny shredded plastic bits across a repaired canvas, Filipino artist Gilbert Angeles is using waste to create paintings. Since 2019, he has made over 2,000 such paintings. The 49-year-old artist was compelled to take action after finding out that his country is one of the top marine plastic polluters in the world.
We are the third contributor of plastic waste into the ocean, the third in the world. When I found out about that, I had to think of ways to raise awareness and knowledge on the reasons why we contribute these waste.
All of Angeles' paintings are made from a mix of shredded plastics, expired paint, and leftover wood from demolished homes. These materials are either sourced from around his neighborhood in Manila or donated by the contacts he has built since starting his campaign.
I love the fact that it gives us hope. This particular painting is called Living Hope, and that I find it really does give living hope. It's got beautiful colours, recycled plastic, repurposing bad things and making them beautiful things, or not necessarily bad things, but things that damage our environment.
Angeles' artwork has been featured in upscale galleries, with paintings being sold for up to thousands of dollars. An amount of the profit will go to his recently established group Green Arts, which aims to promote the usage of recycled waste to produce artwork.
Singer Jennifer Lopez and former baseball star Alex Rodriguez have reportedly split up after almost 4 years together. The split follows recent rumors linking Rodriguez with one of the stars of the TV reality show Southern Charm. Lopez said late last year that they had postponed their wedding twice because of the coronavirus pandemic. Lopez, who began her career as a dancer and a singer, produced and starred in the 2019 movie Hustlers. She also sang at US President Joe Biden's inauguration in January. The couple was last photographed together in late February in the Dominican Republic, where she is shooting a movie. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Lows and the highs of the business world now. World's leading virtual currency Bitcoin has risen above $60,000 mark for the first time. It is benefiting from optimism in financial markets after US President Joe Biden signed a $1.9 trillion relief bill. Last month, US electric car maker Tesla invested $1.5 billion in the virtual unit. Bitcoin has increasingly been embraced in more global investment portfolios as holders expand beyond tech geeks. China has blasted the US administration for imposing new restrictions on its national tech giant Huawei Technologies. This comes after Washington imposed tighter restrictions on exports of components used in 5G devices. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said the US is not a reliable country that is to be trusted. At a news briefing, Zhao said the measure will hurt both the countries as it will severely disrupt bilateral trade and technological exchanges. He added the move will undermine the global industrial chains and supply chains. Zhao urged the US to immediately stop what he called the suppression of the Chinese companies and treat them fairly. The UK says its moves to ease post-Brexit trade checks on some food products with Northern Ireland are lawful and right. The moves have angered the European Union and further soured the ties between Brussels and London. Prime Minister Boris Johnson mounted a defence of Britain's unilateral move during a trip to Northern Ireland. Johnson said the UK wants to ensure that the Northern Ireland Protocol upholds the wishes of both the communities. He reiterated that the measures are right in view of the impact on the peace process and Good Friday Agreement.
I think the most important thing about the protocol is that it should guarantee the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement, which we all believe in, and everybody in Ireland, in the UK, and Northern Ireland has worked so hard to achieve. And there's got to be a balance and symmetry in that. And what we want to ensure is that the protocol upholds the wishes of all communities, of both communities, and has the consent of both.
And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now with the latest updates. You can follow us on social media at Indus.News.